Hold on. And now, full screen. Is that better?
Sure.
Can you see it all?
Yep.
Awesome.
Where you go to that?
Now I gotta go back to it again, don't I?
Okay, so let's just read this really quick. Okay, this is super important. Let's start it. The professional inspection.
Okay.
Because this is most times than not, this is what we're going to use right here. And this language is also available on the, it's very similar on the inspection addendum, which we can use. I'm happy to go through that next here. But okay, so at buyer's expense, buyer may have the property and all elements and systems thereof inspected by one or more licensed professionals of buyer's choice. Provided, however, buyer must specify, identify in this agreement any desired invasive inspections that may include testing or removal of any portion of the property, for example, radon and mold. So it's funny, like radon, like you're not really taking air away, but if you want to do radon, you gotta get permission. So this would also apply to a soil sample for an oil tank. You kind of touched upon that. So you need to be specific, and it says right here, must specifically identify. So any others recommended by the inspector, I see that a lot on that list. So say general home inspection, sewer scope, radon testing, and any other inspection recommended by the inspector is not specific, right? Those are very unspecific terms. So if you want to do the inspection, you know you want to do it, put it there first, okay? There's another addendum we'll show you in a minute, which is an alternative to using this. Okay, but this is the meat of it here. This is the really important part I want to talk to you guys about. Buyer understands, buyer is responsible for the restoration of the property following any inspection, test performed by buyer or buyers on buyer's behalf. So if you wreck the property, you have to fix it. Buyer shall have 8, 10 business, whatever it is, business days after the date buyer and seller have signed and accepted this agreement here in the inspection period. And this is a capitalized term. They made it a capitalized term, inspection period. So if you want to refer to this in an agreement, you want to extend the inspection period, it's a capital I, capital P, and you have to explain it all, it's already there. So inspection period, it's capitalized term, okay? It's like algebra, where A stands for something, B stands for something else, inspection period is what it stands for.
How do you choose how many days you want to put on there? If the default's 10, why would you choose 8?
Because you're trying to make your offer more attractive. In this market, people are reducing that number down.
If you feel like you need more in another market, you
Yeah.
add more.
Yeah, if it's a piece of farm property, maybe you want 12, 15, 20, depends on the property, right? Could be a lot of different things.
Right.
But you also have to make it marketable to the seller. Right? You don't want to be negotiating the inspection period on a typical real estate deal. It's like the last thing you want to be negotiating. Okay, buyer shall, okay, this is super important. This is in which a complete inspections and negotiation with seller regarding any matters disclosed in the inspection report. So you have those 10 days to inspect the property and negotiate all repairs, okay? 10 business days or 8 business days in this case. Oh, can I?
No.
You do it, you do it.
No,
No,
you're
I want you to do it.
No, you do.
I'm sure, it feels right.
Push a little
Okay.
circle button.
Okay,
I don't want to be Vanna.
all right. So this is a key point here, right? Is another one. Buyer shall not provide all or any portion of the inspection report to seller unless requested by seller. Who knows what breach of contract is? Okay. Let's go down. Can you scroll to 27.2, I think?
27.2.
I think that's it.
Whee! I love that he knows the numbers. He
It is-
just, I've
it is a lot.
been
It
in just
is
as long as him and.
27.3. It's not 3, sorry.
Don't know the number.
All right. If seller signs and accepts this agreement, title is marketable, and one buyer has material or misrepresented, these are earnest money payments that would be back to the buyer. So if buyer fails to complete this transaction in accordance with the material terms of this agreement, then seller at seller's option may terminate this agreement. All earnest money paid or agreed to be paid shall be paid to seller as liquidated damages. So do you think sending over an inspection report without permission would qualify as a breach by the buyer? And that one email could cost your client all earnest money. As a listing agent, if you sent me that inspection report, I would scare the Jesus out of you. I'd be like, thank you, we're gonna keep your client's earnest money and we're gonna sell the house to somebody else. And you'd be like, what? You'd be like, yeah, you just breached the contract. You'd be like, I don't know what that means. What do you mean breach the contract? And I'd say 27.3, have a read. Thank you. All right, so
So if buyer sends over the inspection report to the seller?
without
Without
permission.
permission. It states,
It's a
go
full
back,
permission.
let's go back. Hold on.
Buyer shall not, underline, provide
Okay.
all or any portion of the inspection report to seller unless requested by seller. So,
Here's a great reason why you should read the entire contract so that you understand what you're having your client sign and you can specify that to them as well.
you may just think you're being
And you.
helpful. You may just be right out there, your purchase agreement, you may be like, you might write your addendum, and you'd be like, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna say, repair the sewer line per the sewer scope. And then you're gonna send the sewer scope over to be helpful, right? Well, you just breach contract. In fact, putting per the sewer scope in the addendum, I think is a breach of the agreement.
Why would the seller care? Why would you need?
Because you don't wanna know what's on that report.
They have to
If I'm representing a
disclose.
seller, I don't wanna know
Oh, okay.
anything on the report. I'm avoiding that report as much as I can.
So
Yeah.
did you just say if you did an addendum that say repair the sewer per sewer scope, you just breached the?
Well, you may not have breached it, but you're certainly
You
setting.
certainly said there's something wrong in the
Yeah, that
report.
doesn't work. And I think whenever I see addendums written like that, I'm like, that doesn't work. Cause now you're forcing me to ask for it, right?
Uh-huh.
But I don't have to ask for it. So it's kind of like, it's a kind of I don't know if it's an avoidable term. I haven't really put my head around it, but it's not an effective term.
So you put in exactly what you want then, so like.
Be
Yeah,
very specific.
Buyer wants you to
Very
repair
specific.
sewer.
Seller to install new 30-year architectural comp roof or 30-year certainty architectural comp roof in the heather gray color, whatever, like be specific. Think about like, okay, if this is accepted, what's gonna happen? Like, think beyond just what you're asking for. Think about the repercussions of what you're asking for if they say yes, and will that get your clients what they want?
it's kind of like, think back to like all the movies that you see where they say make a wish, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not very specific on what your wish is, you're gonna get what you don't want,
Right.
right?
So the seller comes back and says, why do they want that? There's no reason for a new roof. And
Then if they ask you for the report, well, here's them. If they
Right.
ask you why not, you just say, well, there needs to be a roof. Would you like to see the inspection report?
Could you?
And then if they ask you for, sure, send me over that page. If you send them over the whole report, breach contract.
Yep.
So you have to section out the report, that section of the report that they asked for.
What would you say if there was a problem on the sewer scope and you wrote an addendum?
I would say seller to repair break in sewer line at approximately this foot from the front of the house. All work to be done by a licensed and bonded plumbing contractor.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I would
Would
say.
you also use an inspection addendum, like, let's say you're mid-inspection and the inspector's trying to like pull, toilet up
Mhm.
to the scope,
Right,
and they're afraid of breaking the toilet,
absolutely.
then you would just say like,
You would have, you're probably gonna have to get permission from,
Yeah.
I hope that the inspector you're using is gonna be smart enough to ask for
yeah,
permission
just
to do
say like,
that.
I don't wanna break this, like.
Exactly, and like,
Most
remember we
inspectors-
said right here, remember we said,
Repair.
yeah, if testing removal of any portion of the property, including, for example, that removal of the toilet is beyond just a normal sewer scope.
Yeah.
Usually a normal sewer scope, you're just removing the cap and you're shoving the thing down or not on the toilet.
I just remember my own house, they couldn't do it because there was this painted over so many times.
Mhm.
the
You
cap.
couldn't get it off.
You didn't get to it, yeah.
That's-
But the most inspectors will have a form that they require the seller to sign.
Yeah.
Stating that it's okay to remove the toilet.
Is there a way to know ahead of time about?
You mean All-Star, if you were at the property and you're looking it over, before your clients wrote an offer and we're like, where's the cap at? Where's the sewer- sewer scope? Sometimes they're buried too, that can be hard to find.
Yeah, my recent listing, the buyer says that right in front of the offer, we want to inspection lined up, permission to toilet necessary.
Yeah, that's thinking ahead, like, you
Yeah.
just say, yeah, you put that in ahead of time.
So as a listing agent, it'd be very imperative to find out where that,
It's something, I usually have a discussion with people like, hey, do you happen to know, in preparation for the inspection, do you know where the sewer cap is? Or if it's a property that's on septic, do you know where the lid to the sewer tank is approximately? Because that makes it a lot, see, that's even a bigger mess.
that is, I had one that was buried about 12 inches deep. So that in the lawn, so they had to come and cut out, they'd first find it, and then they had to cut out all the lawn around it. And then it was like, okay, now we want this to be more accessible, right?
Yeah, it's like like a septic tank, for example, it usually is on a larger piece of property, right, where it could be anywhere. I mean, the inspector can look at, in the winter, it'd be really hard because, like, where's it at? Because usually there's a green trail, sort of, you know,
Yeah.
where the waste was made the grass grow healthier, or whatever. But if that's not available, if it's winter and everything's green, you're just kind of like guessing. You could get a drawing from the county, called like an as-built drawing. But that's assuming that the property's new enough to have that. If it's old, there may not be one. So it can cost a lot of money to find that septic tank. And to dig it up, you're paying like $100 an hour for something to dig.
Since we're still on the subject of inspections, when you're dealing with a condo, what do you guys like to do with regards to radon and sewer? Again, when you're in a condo and you're not living on the ground floor.
Right, so if I think about, I would leave it up to my client, I would just arm them with the radon information as far as it goes, because it probably is dissipated. It's only $150 typically, so in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge amount of money. It might be worth a piece of mind just to make sure. But with the condo, it makes it complicated, because what's the repair? Usually they vent that stuff outside, and as soon as you leave the envelope of the building, you're kind of on community property. So how are you installing a radon mitigation system there, kind of difficult.
And how do you scope a main sewer line when you've got?
Right, that might be tough.
Yeah.
That might be tough.
For the HOA, we're responsible for that anywhere, so.
But yeah, but do they have money to fix it? But even if they didn't, would they let you fix it? I mean, there's so many, it's so complicated.
They also will probably not get back to you in a time.
Right.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
won't have the answer by the time the inspection period's over.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we just chose not to do them on condos.
Okay, let's just finish this term. During the inspection period, shall or shall not be required to modify any terms of this agreement already reached with buyer. That means that the agreement stands unless changed otherwise, right? Buyer may notify seller in writing. This is the thing. This is the stick. You know, when I talk about contingencies, this is your stick to get repairs done, right? So buyer may notify seller in writing of buyer's unconditional disapproval of the property based on any inspection report, in which case all earnest money deposits shall probably be refunded and this transaction shall be terminated. If buyer fails, this is so big, you guys, this drives me crazy. Okay, it's in bold for a reason, right? If buyer fails to provide seller with written unconditional disapproval of any inspection reports by 5 p.m. on the final day of the inspection period, buyer shall be deemed to have accepted the condition of the property. Okay, so 5 p.m. on the 10th business day, in this case, the 8th business day, at 5 p.m., the contingency dies, right? Your clients have defined that property as is, where is. They cannot negotiate any repairs with any kind of leverage. Okay, so don't ever miss this day. Don't ever miss it. It's like your one day you gotta know. It's the most important day in your entire transaction. Don't miss it. Okay. Set a reminder on your phone. Don't get caught off guard with it. It's super important. Okay. Because you don't want to be telling your client, oh hey, so our inspection contingency expired yesterday. How come? I didn't know that. Well, you should read your contract. Like that's not gonna be flat. That's not gonna be flat. They're gonna be pissed at you. Don't want to ever make that phone call. It's horrible. Never make that phone call. All right. Okay. That's, I think, all I want to touch in on this agreement. Should we go to, let's look at that alternative inspection addendum really fast that you pulled up? Yeah.
Recommend having a termination agreement signed by your buyer if it's closed and the seller's not responding.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. So it's not just a termination agreement, because, and I've told you, I don't know if stop if I told you the story. I had a real contentious negotiation over siding one time. It was stucco siding, and it was 15 years old, and there'd been no signs of moisture, no signs of any issues with it. But the buyer was having a cow about it. They had drilled holes in the siding we allowed them to get soil, to get samples to see if there was any moisture. Everything was dry, but they kept saying, no, you have to inside the house for us, or you're gonna give us like a $35,000 credit. We're like, no. They terminated, so they served the termination agreement. We never signed it because we continued negotiating. The inspection contingency had lapsed, but they'd only sent us over the termination agreement. So I said to them, I was like, okay, that's great, sorry, this isn't gonna work out. I sent over our own termination agreement requesting all the earnest money back. And he's like, well, what's this about? I said, well, you guys never unconditionally disapproved. You terminated, we didn't sign it. The period had passed, it says you have to unconditionally disapprove. They didn't unconditionally disapprove. We use that leverage to get a much more reasonable, deal to close it. So instead of giving 35, we give 10.
So when I'm sorry, so the buyer signs termination, that doesn't matter.
You need to, well, not just, no, that it can be terminated, so in the termination agreement, it says the party that signs this terminates this and may revoke it at any point up until the time it's signed by the other party. The problem was, they have to sign a term, they didn't unconditionally disapprove, they just terminated, it's two different things. So if you're terminating, you need to unconditionally disapprove on one document and then terminate on the second one. So what I always do is I pull the language off, maybe go back, sorry. I go back to, there is an actual form that's called the unconditional disapproval that you can use.
Yeah.
It asks for a ton of details, so I think it's a little much. It asks for like the time you sent it and the method in which you sent it. I just think that's a lot. But because it's all digitally stamped, right? You have an email that shows the time you sent it. What I would just say is I just pull the verbiage from down here. I just say, buyer hereby unconditionally disapproves of the inspection based on any inspection reports. All earnest money deposits shall promptly be refunded and this transaction should be terminated. So I'll just write that on a blank addendum, and then I'll send over the termination agreement with the top and the bottom filled out with all the earnest money going back on file.
So even
It's a
if like
two-part.
the inspection report is not horrible, but your buyers are just like, they look at it and they're like, or
Yeah, so there's two, I've heard two interpretations on the words unconditional disapproval. One, which is the more commonly thought of one, is we unconditionally, we don't tell you why, we don't have to give you a condition, we just disapprove. It could be over.
so they don't have to say
Right.
a specific reason. It's
Right.
just-
Then there's another interpretation of that would be, like, I see some people say that do these repairs, otherwise we terminate at this date. That may not be unconditional as well, right? So I would never confound my two addendums where I say, make all these repairs, but if you don't, then at 5 PM we terminate, because that's maybe conditional. I don't know. So, what do you think about that, Keith?
I agree with the first one, because
Yeah.
unconditional means that there's no,
Right, but if I put a condition on it,
Then it's not unconditional.
so, I mean, that's the argument someone made to me, and it kind of makes sense, so I've never tied the two together, that's why I always have the separate, if it's getting late, I always have a separate one, I don't take a shortcut and just have it all in one addendum where I say, make these repairs or else, I say, make these repairs, and then I'll have armed, to send over at 4:55 or whatever, the unconditional disapproval package, okay?
Especially if you know that they're not going to.
Yeah, or if you suspect, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, you don't wait till, you don't wanna wait until the end, because it just puts a lot of pressure on the transaction.
Is there any issue that on my transaction, we were getting down to this deadline, and so I verbally told the agent that, hey, we're ready to terminate,
Yeah.
we're not signing this as
Yeah.
is, which forced their hand, I didn't know if that was like.
That's totally, no, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah,
It's perfect, because that's what your clients are really thinking, then yeah, absolutely, that's perfect. Okay, so instead of listing all the repairs on that line where we have to specify the repairs, this addendum's great. It sets the exact same terms for the inspection period, but you're able to select the specific addendum, the specific inspections you're gonna do. And I see this form just checked all the way out, like everybody just blindly checks everything. It's like, this is almost every inspection you could possibly imagine right here. And you agree to do them all, and no one ever gets their second look. It almost always just gets signed as is. I've never had anybody come back and say, you may not do a land survey, like it just never happens. So, like, I think this is a great form for that, if you want to keep it broad ahead of time.
Isn't professional home inspection cover a lot of that stuff anyways?
No, I mean, not asbestos, I mean, electrical sort of,
Depth.
siding sort of, but yeah, not in depth, right? I mean,
He's gonna tell you like if he suspects that there's moisture in the walls
Mm-hmm.
or that he sees mold, but you're gonna want a real mold inspector to come in,
okay.
right?
Got it.
although I will say, like, with mold, no one ever goes, oh, it's just a safe kind. Like,
The safe kind?
Kind of safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, mold's
Safe
everywhere. Have you not heard? Mold is everywhere.
well, there's people who will say, people will try to convince you like some mold's good, some mold's bad, not good, but some mold's not as bad as other kinds.
Yeah.
Nobody cares, if it's growing, they want it gone. Okay, let's move past this and let's go to the buyer's repair addendum.
Back. You have it on
It's the
there?
last, one of the last two.
If you don't use that inspection addendum, check every box, and just use the other one, and then the inspector comes out and is like, well, I think I see mold, I think I see this, then do you write an addendum?
Then you have to get permission to pull that stuff away, yeah. If you
Now
permission.
follow up.
And the big reason being like, let's say it's an underground oil tank. And you find, there's full samples and the ground's contaminated. The cleanup can be really, really expensive. So the seller needs to know that ahead of time before getting the permission to do it. Because they could be on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars.
If the seller says, no, you cannot continue to, take samples or whatnot,
Yeah.
is that when you can say for that?
That is, yeah, most likely your client's gonna say. Because not just, it's not just not knowing, but it's also thinking that somebody knows something I don't know, and that's why they're not aware. Yeah, that's what usually happens. So when I represent a seller, and I just went through this representing a buyer, if you don't let somebody inspect something, it really causes a lot of issues in the transaction.
So
A lot of distress.
this just is stuck in my head. So by not sending, so if I didn't get permission to send the inspection report, is that just for disclosure reasons? Because if there is something in there now, the seller has to disclose it to the next buyer?
Yep.
Okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
This is just like, I don't understand.
That's it. Because they're like, they don't know, they don't have to say.
Yeah, okay.
Plus, who knows if your inspector's any good?
Right,
Buyer and
yeah.
seller doesn't know if your
Right.
inspector's any good, because you could be making this stuff up. But now they've got this big cloud that's on the property they have to disclose, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never, you guys, when you start listing property, try not to get the inspection report unless it's vital. And then if you do, get just the spot that you need to explain what it prepares being asked. That's like a big thing. Some people, and maybe if it's a reoccurring thing, like you're on your second transaction, then at that point, maybe you're like, maybe we should get the whole report so we really know what we're dealing with here. But typically I avoid it at all costs. Okay, so per the terms of the contract, you are gonna be mandated to use this form to ask for repairs. And it's very basic. So, presentation of this addendum to seller shall not constitute a counteroffer or refusal to buy by buyer to honor the terms of the existing sale agreement. Did I get that right? Shall not constitute a counteroffer or refusal by buyer to honor the terms of the existing sale agreement. So this is just an ask, you're asking for this, all right? No, buyer should promptly deliver this repair addendum to seller, so there's no deadline for seller's acceptance of this proposal. The parties may wish to consider a written extension of any applicable inspection periods. Buyer requests seller to perform the following repairs and or take other corrective actions, repairs / corrective actions, again, right there, another capitalized term, okay? Described as follows. The seller may request a copy of any inspections upon which the following items are based. If the completion date for the repairs / corrective actions is beyond the scheduled closing date, this party should identify a new closing date as part of this addendum. Buyer shall not provide all or any portion of the inspection report to seller unless requested by seller, okay? So right here is where you'll start listing things, and if you go long, you can go right there for additional details, see addendum. And like I told you guys this, I like to name my addendums by the date. So, because if it's A, B, C, D, E, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the lender's gonna wanna see, like, if you send the lender addendum C, but they don't have addendums A or B, they don't wanna know why they don't have a copy of it. Most likely it's because there's something on there they don't want to.
Here's the other thing too,
Yeah.
and this happened to us. The agent on the other side was following suit for the A, B, C, missed one letter, so we had to do an addendum stating that there was no addendum G. Because we were that far into it. So just unnecessary, right? So you name it by the date,
I go date.
I named it by whatever it was.
Yeah, some people call it the, whatever the.
Credit
the thing is.
addendum,
Mhm.
inspection addendum.
Yeah. All are good things. So let's say you're going to do a combo addendum here. So you're going to ask for some repairs and you're also going to ask for a credit in lieu of repairs. What you'll do is you'll name your repairs here. You'll click the box right there. You'll put the name of the addendum and then you'll go on to a separate addendum that will say seller to credit buyer $5,000 at closing towards buyer's prepaid expenses and lender allowable those costs. Something like that.
Sorry, on this, write your repairs, and you write something like in lieu of.
Yep,
the
yep.
addendum.
Yep, Totally, so even if I'm just gonna ask for the credit, I will just leave all this blank and I will just fill that part in with the date. And then I'll put the seller to credit buyer work on the other addendum.
On a generic addendum.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on a generic. Your lenders will thank you for doing that. Lenders don't like the word repair because it causes issues for them.
Underwriters,
Underwriters,
they
yeah,
want,
underwriters don't care.
they want it all.
Yeah, and I just got the phone with my mortgage broker. The seller's agent, it's a Washington deal, and Washington has the entire repair negotiation on one piece of paper. So we ask for repair, they respond to repair, we accept or reject the repair. So it's just like it's a history of the negotiation. And the seller's agent sent it over to my lender. And she's like, I don't want any of this. I don't want to see this. I don't want to know about this. We do not want this to be part of the transaction. We just want to see the credit of that. So, yes. Okay. Should we just pull up the other addendum just to show?
Yeah,
Oh, wait, yeah, it's good. So the seller will respond down here if they agree, they'll check that box. If they decline, they check that box. And they may submit a seller's repair addendum, which looks just like this, but the names are flip-flopped. Let's go back up just a little bit more.
Is that so that then they do it, if they decline it, then they put in their own to say, but I will do these things.
They could do that, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And if you go back and forth a couple times, my suggestion would be once the seller's responded to you and you don't want to do that, you're gonna reject that one, then I would go onto my buyer's one and just say, this shall supersede any previous addendums, any previous buyer or seller repair addendums, just to start fresh, because you don't want people keeping track of what's been agreed to and what hasn't been agreed to.
Yeah.
Just start fresh and reiterate what it is you guys agreed or requested. This date here is a date that the repair should be completed by. Sometimes I see agents like really escalate this date up, it's like, let's have it in a week, even though we're closing in 3 weeks. It's like, give somebody a chance to get a repair done. Like, I think the week of is fine. I mean, give yourself some time to re-inspect because there's this period here. And I always think a re-inspection is good because it's gonna absolve you of some of the, it's not your job to say if the repair is done correct or not. But if that's not done, there's a re-inspection isn't done, then if for some reason, after closing, the repair's not done right, you don't have anybody to blame. So it's like, you will be taking on they'll be like, well, how come you didn't tell me the repair wasn't done correctly? It's not my responsibility. This would just clear that up a little bit. You're right, it would not be your responsibility, but still, this would clear it up a lot. So having an inspector come out and take a look at it is a good thing. Make sure though, that he understands what repair you've asked for, right? And the wording that you use, so bring your repair addendum out and say, hey, this was it done per these terms here? And so when you're, to go back to the beginning, when you're writing that, keep in mind that someone's probably gonna come out and re-inspect it. And so you wanna make sure that you're being complete. That he's going to be your inspector, he or she's gonna come back and look at it and say, yes, that was done to what my mind thought, that's done correctly. It's not shortcutted, it's not band-aided. So you have to be very specific in what you ask for. You guys kind of follow me on this?
Yeah.
Keep in mind, someone's gonna be looking at your work essentially, right? Like you're asking for it, they're gonna do it hopefully they're gonna do it based upon what you've asked for, and then someone's gonna inspect it based upon what you asked for. So be really thoughtful with this.
So if it's a little complicated, it might be good to have an initial discussion with the inspector, if.
Oh, absolutely,
Uh-huh.
yeah, absolutely.
If we get repairs on this, what do you expect to see?
Well, it's not necessarily what you expect to see, just understand what it is he's asking
Yeah.
for,
Uh-huh.
what it is he thinks a defect is,
Uh-huh.
and
And
then
be clear on
try to cure that defect.
That's the one most of the time where you just ask for credit.
This is why I love credits, because it really takes a lot of this stuff away, right? It just,
And then for going and like backtracking on negotiating repairs and whatnot. Typically, like, I guess you talk with the other agent, like, just say like, hey, you're thinking of this before you're writing it, or
so there's a couple different ways to do
rather than
this.
sending like, back and forth.
Right.
Sending.
Well, if you're just gonna tell them what you're gonna ask for, they don't have to respond, right? So, and you don't really know who's responding to you, is it the seller who's injecting on it, or is it the seller, or is it the seller's agent that's saying no?
Yeah.
So I think if you're gonna ask for repairs, formally ask for them. We talked about this a little bit on your deal. A really effective way to do this would be as a seller's, as a buyer's agent, be like, oh my God, the furnace, the roof, like really build it up. And then like, hey, and then whittle it down, right? Whittle it down. Send a streamlined request, like, hey, I talked to them and we were able to kind of move on to a couple of the issues. So in the back of the mind, you've already kind of set an expectation of more than what you're asking for. It's probably a little bit easier to expect.
To credit, addendum, do you prefer asking for a credit or reduction in sales price or how?
So if it's a cash deal, reduction in sales price is the same thing as a credit, right? Because they said to bring less money to closing. When there's a loan, your buyer probably doesn't actually realize the change, because like the change in price is gonna affect their payment by like what, $2 a month, maybe
Right.
$1 a month. It could take them 30 years, it could take 20 years to realize that repair, right, to get the money back on that repair. So credit, always credit when you're dealing with a loan, but you're gonna be capped at the amount of the closing costs.
Right.
So
you have
that
to include
So
them.
the amount of money they would have to bring in, it's not included in their down payment. So the amount of money they bring in to closing, not including the down payment, is how much they can request.
And you really have to watch if you have, and it might not be in today's market with some houses I've seen, but if you're already asking for closing costs help at closing, this would be in addition to that. So then you really need to make sure and watch
Yeah.
what your seller credits are going to end up being.
In a
Because that's
different,
where they could lose it, and then now they're expecting to have this extra money in their pocket to take care of these repairs and check with the lender, because sometimes you can end up having it and they lose 6,000 of that because they didn't need it for their closing costs.
Yeah. So if you over negotiate this, right? If you make it to be so, if you say, let's say at the time the offer is accepted, you've requested $8,000 in closing costs. But there's only like $3,000 left that they're actually gonna bring in. So but you have another $8,000 repairs, you've negotiated it, there's a $5,000 difference that they probably won't bring into closing now, they won't get back at closing, they don't have anything to apply it to. And the sellers will be like, shouldn't even happen, like.
Right?
"Well, I don't know."
Sorry.
Yeah, like I can't credit you what you can't take, so. Even most loans, you can credit up to like 3 to 6%. But you start getting into things that don't pay you back, like I try to limit it to the amount of money they're bringing from their bank account to the house, right? So if it's gonna be $10,000 to pay their prepaid taxes, insurance, escrow fees, loan fees, like if that's $10,000, I would wanna try to limit that amount to $10,000. Now, we can find a place for the other 12 to go, but it's like buying down their rate, which again, doesn't really provide them anything for years. They're not gonna get that money back for years down the road. So it doesn't really, I mean, it's better than nothing, but it doesn't really solve the problem with, if you have like really detrimental, real problems that affect the stability of the property of the house, and they don't have a lot of money to fix them, you haven't done them any good by lowering your interest rate from 3.14 to 3%. It's gonna take them years to make up that difference, to be able to fix a hole in the roof or whatever the issue is.
So you're saying you can only deduct from the closing costs and prepaids, or not, I'm thinking front, the suppliers bringing $100,000 cash.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So then it's reducing the price.
You can reduce the price, which is effectively the same thing as buying down the rate. It's just not a great alternative.
Should we write like the new sales price fee or like the reduction?
Oh, you just say the purchase price. would
Purchase
be-
price to base.
Yeah, purchase price.
In older homes, what often happens in older homes is you do your best estimate on what a repair is gonna cost, then you get into it and there's other stuff going on.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you do a credit on older homes?
Anyhow,
Anyhow.
it's a risky one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You can get, hopefully you can get a bid, but it can be difficult in this market. It's really, this climate, it's not just the market, right? There's a climate whole with contractors being super busy right now.
Uh-huh.
Like it's a great time to be a contractor. And so getting that bid may be difficult. So you just do the best you can. There's no surefire thing, the surefire thing. Like, because the flip side of that is, what if somebody comes in and repairs it to the word of the contract, but actually isn't a really thorough fix of it, with this kind of a half measure, what if it's not done with the right materials, the materials that you would have selected if you were gonna stay in the house versus the materials you would select if you're selling the house.
There was another one that we had, that was crazy on the Clark group. It was a house in Oregon City, and it had a septic system. And when they did, with the listing, and when they did the inspections, they did a storage or underground storage tank scan and found that there was an oil tank, and the oil tank was leaking. And it was close enough that it was leaking towards the well, right? It ended up costing over $50,000 in repairs to be able to fix that, plus that, because it was an old house, the septic field wasn't big enough for how many bedrooms and bathrooms that the home had. So that had to get expanded. And because of all these repairs, and it was winter time, moisture, water, right, harder to dig and stuff, it extended out how long the closing date was. And so for that instance, and the poor lady, it was her retirement, her savings, everything in that house, right? But so that closing, it was like 6 months later by the time we actually got to close on that home.
It's a really good example.
Think about that too, right? So
How to fix it.
buyers, as we got closer and some of the things where the sewer line was fixed, or the sewer line, but the septic system, they were still working on the underground removal of all the soil. The people ended up moving in because they had nowhere to go. And she'd already moved, like everyone's still kind of stuck to their dates, but that's not the ideal situation that you want to do.
Yeah.
Right?
This is a perfect example of how things can snowball.
Crazy.
So there's certain things you definitely want to take credit for, like underground storage tanks, issues with the well, like if your well's not bringing enough water, just redigging a new well, that's like, it's not a science, you can't just say, it's gonna cost $20,000 to dig a well. What if where they wanna dig it, there's a bunch of rock, they're gonna bolt through the rock, it's gonna increase the cost, or put in a new septic line, what if they found a bunch of rocks, when you're digging rock is like, it's really costly, they move out, so there's certain repairs that you're gonna want to insist to get done, and there are certain repairs that you may want to let your client take control of the way to get done.
We have 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I've got
before-
to, and I've
go
got
for
it.
closing.
And I've got, can you
You
take
gotta
that, because I've got.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you all for
did you hit all
listening.
the forms that you wanted to?
We hit all
do?
the forms, do you guys have any questions about the forms before I jump out?
Not until I have to use them.
Perfect, yeah, yeah.
And then you all know where to find Kelly,
Yeah,
right?
you know where I'll be. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You can all reach back out to me too. Okay, so closing day. How many have had a closing day? Awesome. Look at that. Yay. Were you prepared for it? Did you know what to tell your buyers or your sellers?
It was not an event because they did it like at her house and I didn't even know.
Those suck. I know, I can't even imagine that. That's like the best day ever. That's the day that we get to celebrate with our clients. You get to go to the closing table, even though you don't do anything other than sit there and be their cheerleader. I mean, that's what
I
we're
was
doing
bummed.
closing. I
Like,
bet.
That's growing, I'm like, so what time is she coming in? And they're like, oh no, it's already done. I'm like,
Notary.
what? That was totally bummed.
I believe they're all opening now though, right? And have you been to one in person yet? No. Okay. Anyone else?
My client had to get in the car and drive 7 hours overnight because lender issues and deadlines and they haven't,
Oh, I know.
but it's very stressful. It was down to the.
Yeah.
So yes,
Have
it's stressful.
you been to the closing table? Sitting down?
No, not sitting down, I'm my buyers, of course, and stuff. That's, both my business and the new buyers. Which is a little odd.
It's not how we normally do it. We'll talk about that.
Right, right,
Sometimes other situations.
yeah.
And-
Mine was a situation they met because there was the landscaping in the back
Mhm.
with fountains and
They want to
He was
know how to
running
take
that
care of it.
And how the drip watering system and all,
Yep.
and it's, that one was crazy, so they had.
There are times that you do, absolutely. Yeah. Especially when you've got really great buyers and sellers, right? There, I mean, there isn't a reason why you really shouldn't do that after the sign.
The sellers bought their buyer a bottle of wine, really nice bottle of wine.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like-
Yeah.
And there was some little thing with the spigot that was broken when he was trying to set it, so they gave her $50 in cash to go buy a new spigot.
That's
The
awesome.
sellers for the buyers, I was like, how awesome is that?
Take care of those plants.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they wanna know that you're gonna love their plants
Oh.
just as much as they did.
I
Yeah.
remember on the first one, the buyer had questions for the seller about it, and they are signed,
Yeah,
but then there was a reason why I should. Second one, the listing agent was going over to give her the keys, the buyer key, I'm sorry, the selling agent was going to give her the keys. And then in the last minute, her mother had some medical emergency, which she didn't go.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
I got to why we shouldn't let it be protected.
Yeah, well, no. And how about you? Did you get to go to the closing table? No?
No, she was in Eugene, I couldn't.
Oh, well, there's the other one. Okay, so normally closing week, you're, number one, you're checking in with the escrow officer to find out, make double check on the funds. You're letting your buyers, know that they need to, send in the funds or bring the funds ahead of time or, whatever the situation is. And everyone is different, so you've got to find that out from escrow. It's always best that we're on top of it, right? Escrow's reaching out to them and they're talking to them and they're collecting, but we also want to remind them that we're part of this transaction too, because really, truly, after the inspections are done, you're done, right? And so the more that we're in touch, we're staying in touch with the lender to make sure that the appraisal's happening. We're touching base with our buyers and our sellers, depending on where it's at. So if we're on the selling or the listing side, we're contacting the agent. How's the appraisal? Where is it at? Checking with your seller. Checked in, we're waiting to hear. Just always communicating and always sharing that you're doing the most stuff. So closing week, check in, make sure that they've talked to your buyer or, about the funds and that they're collecting it. They set up a wire transfer or the money's coming from, especially on a closing here and a purchase here, right? Your buyers are closing on a house. Staying in touch with both escrow offices, making sure it's not the same one, that they're aware and the funds are ready to go over on the day that we sign so that it can go to the next one, right? Has anybody been in a chain yet? Where you have 5? That's fun. That's a tough one. Everything, of course, always relies on the very first house, right? So you are a really good agent or transaction coordinator is gonna stay on top of all the way and make sure that that first one is happening and so that everything moves smoothly all the way down, especially if you're the last one, right? So stay in touch with your escrow office, make sure that your buyers are aware of what they need to bring to the closing table. They need to bring their ID, right? They need to bring sometimes a deposit check, right? It depends. So you want to check with your escrow office on that too. They're getting money back. How are they getting the money back? Some will deposit it, some will wire it, some will cut them a check, right? So you want to see how that is, how they first ask the escrow officer, how will they receive the money back? What are their options? Talk to your buyer, your seller. How do you want it? And give them their options, even though escrow is doing the same thing, right? It's again, we are the ones facilitating this whole thing. So we want to make sure that they know we're aware of everything that's happening. ID is the big one, right? And then when you get there, you want to, did anyone bring gifts?
I did.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can go to the table, but yes, right?
What
Bring
did
a
you
gift to the table.
I had cheese boards engraved with Stacy Bent Keller Williams and our logo and everything on it. Groupon, $4 a piece.
Nice. And everything can be different, right? Some people not knowing logo is on there. Why did you do the logo? Because as gifts, the IRS only allows you $25, I think is still what it is, per person. However, she turned it into promotional materials, and so now it's not a gift, right? So now the tax write-off is much better, being that it has your logo on it.
Are you saying if it doesn't have a logo, it has to be 25 or more
25 or less.
25 or less,
or less?
yes,
Per person.
to get
Per
the
person in
full
the
write-off.
house.
Yeah, so some people do like items like that where they just engrave and they have everything engraved and ready to go. Some people do just random things, whatever you think is the best thing that represents you and what you want to give to your clients.
So I did like a more of a specialty thing for my clients, where I gave like a rose bush with a pot, and I gave him like espresso cups because he roasts his own coffee, but that was way more than $25.
Yeah,
So, and I can't, I
no,
only write off up to 25
per person.
per person.
Per
Yeah.
person in the household,
In the household.
so the baby counts.
Okay.
Right?
She asked if does the baby count? As a
I think it's
person.
adults.
Yeah.
You think it's
You
adult?
can double check with your CPA,
Yeah.
not an account.
So would there be a way to brand a rose bush or a coffee mug?
Coffee mug, yes. The pot, yes.
Oh,
Right?
Yeah.
There's this wonderful thing called Cricut.
called a what?
Cricut? Tiny has one. You can actually like cut out stencils. So if it's something that can be engraved, and then they have this material that's engraving, so then you can cut the stencil out with your name or whatever, your logo, and then you can use the engraving material to do your own, especially if it's a product that you buy locally, right? Because we can all go somewhere and get items made in bulk with our logo on it. But if it's something you want to do locally.
You can't just use a sticker?
Yeah, you could use a sticker.
I mean, it's not as
You
neat.
could do that with, yeah. Right, it's gonna come off.
Go to your client's house and check to see the stickers still.
Yeah. And here's the other thing too, think about this, right? Most of the things that you're gonna present to them, you want it to be something that they're gonna keep and that they're gonna keep out, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, you want your information to not be very big or on the back, right? Because are they gonna want a cheese board sitting out in a beautiful decorated house with your logo out on the top? Probably not, but if you put your logo on the back side of it and maybe on the front, if it was left to stay plain, or if you had it to where it was, their name and established in the year that they bought the house, right? Think about the fun things that you can do with it, then that would be different, right? They will probably keep it out. Back in Montana, there was this couple in our office that had utensils in the container, and their logo was all over the handles and on the container. And I guarantee you, not one house would have that sitting out on their counter, right? Because it's a bit much, and no one wants that out. I mean, yeah, you could turn it, right? But
So if she put a sticker on the bottom of the pot for the rose or on the bottom of the mug,
with her logo and her name and her
You're gonna
information on it.
need-
Yeah, it would get buried, they wouldn't
Yeah.
see it, but
she could deduct
she
it.
could deduct it. So you have a sticker on it, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing that you can do, and things that other agents do that are really fun is, we all know moving day is hectic.
Lord, yes.
Things are forgotten. It's a long day, especially if they're, whether they're moving themselves or not, they're still unpacking, right? So some people do pizza parties. And if you want a really brilliant idea, I heard this from an agent in California. He bought a pizza company because he said pizza is like the highest profitable company that you can own because the cost of making it. So then all of the boxes that he would have the pizza delivered to the families actually had his logo on the boxes. Because at first I was like, how do you get a pizza company to willingly put his logo on the boxes? And then he goes, so I bought it. And I'm like, well, that's how we did it, right? But if you have a relationship with somebody, right, if it's a local business or whatever, and you wanna do a drop off, pizza's cheap, right? And we can all, no one's gonna say no to pizza and pop if you're coming by with it and dropping it off when they're moving. Who's gonna be there? Their friends, their family. The neighbors, maybe, right? You never know who's gonna be around. They're gonna see you as their agent. You're gonna be bringing a pizza and pop and maybe beer or wine, right? So that they can eat while they're moving and they can have a beverage when they're done. And they're gonna go, this is my realtor. And we're gonna, Mr. Buddy, Pizza Mine didn't do that, right? And so think about outside the box a little bit on what you're doing. My best gift ever, it was very expensive, but it was worth it. This is also my 35% referral clients that I told you guys about that I did not want to pay, right? I bought them Micro Beer of the Month Club for a year.
Wow.
It was actually 6 months, but you could do every other month, so I spread it out through a year because he made his own micro beer.
That's cool.
But they're also the ones who are still my friends to this day, and that brought me the most business. And so thinking outside, that one cost me, but it didn't cost me, right? Because of what I got in return for doing something that stood out. For me, I did something different for every client. I got to know them as I worked with them. I didn't care what the cost was because if I got business back from them, it was worth the extra $50, $100, whatever my gift was, right? But it stood out, and usually it was something that stayed in their home, right? The huge clock over the mantle, the house was perfect for that, right? Different things that stand out. You can put your logo on the back of that. And when they move, they're gonna see it. But just remember that your relationship with them is the most important thing, and you being there the day that they close on the biggest purchase of their life, or maybe a sale that means everything to them. Or it's the most heartbreaking sale that they have, right? So that divorce. But just being there and making sure that you're following through with that. And remember that that is your return in business. So you want your gifts to be personal, I think. But, and then add the pizza on top of it. Yeah. I had with another client of mine, they had multiple sales with me on different things. And so, the first gift is always gonna be something super personal. But then what do you get them after that, right? And so it just came down to moving day. So they always moved in the mornings. So I'd always go to Great Harvest and I'd get them this big, huge basket of all these goodies and bread and those wonderful little breakfast wrap breads and just take that and drop it off so that they had goodies for moving day. But awesome. Any questions?
I mean, when it comes down to timelines on closing day, I dealt with they're kind of dragged a little bit on my transaction.
Yeah.
And I was really stressed about like at what point do I get an inventory, what point do I alert the seller's agent that we may want to scare them if we're not gonna close.
Right.
But like, I also need to have addendums ready to extend this timeline. Like,
Absolutely.
It's really like touchy and what would be appropriate. We ended up closing, but it literally was.
But you never know,
last
right? Okay, I had one that didn't close. We didn't find out till closing day. Sellers are out, buyers are already moving in. I honestly think, and think of this too, if you were on the other side, how soon would you want to know that there's an issue, right? Or that things might be delayed. If you were consistently staying on top of your transaction with the lender, with the listing agent, and constantly communicating where we're at and how we're doing, doesn't that make you stand out as a better agent, right? And I would want the same thing likewise, because you could say, hey, just so you know, heads up, I'm trying, I'm not hearing from the lender, I'm not hearing from the appraiser, or whatever it is. And I'm doing everything, I'm in communication every single day. I've reached to a higher up to see where we're at and why we're not there yet. It's that kind of communication that you need to do. If you go to them with that, they're totally understanding, because we all know they've probably been on the other side of one of those too. So I think the more communication, the better.
Having clear to close.
The paperwork, yeah.
Okay, we got good close, wasn't anyways, I just,
Right.
we didn't end up doing an addendum, but it's
Thank God.
like, should I have drawn that up and have the seller sign it?
Just in case. On something like that for closing day, I would do that maybe the day before. Take that one out as far as you can, definitely not the day of, but you also have people scheduling closings, right?
The sellers are already signed too.
Very-
That's why
yeah.
it's
And that requires, if closing day moves, that requires the seller to re-sign. So if we'd known this 4 days prior, and the sellers hadn't signed yet, then that would definitely be something, especially if you know where everything is at in the transaction. Are the sellers out of town? When are they signing? When are they closing? Where are yours at? How many days do we need? If they're out of town, especially sellers, because sellers have to sign that warranty deed, right? And that has to come back in writing. That one has to be wet signatures. It can't be digitally signed. So if the sellers, which
Which one has to be,
it's the deed, the actual deed to the transaction.
and they sign that at closing,
They have to sign it, wet signature.
physically?
Yes. So if it has to be sent to them and they're over, we had one in Malaysia. You don't even know how many places that sucker had to go to come back. They needed to sign a week before closing to make sure that we had the documents signed and back in time for us to fund and record. And if you're on multiple transactions and we're waiting for that, right? So that's where the importance of knowing and staying on top of the closing day comes in play.
It was awesome.
Who was it?
So bad, we were with lawyers.
Lawyers.
Shelley. sorry.
Oh, Shelley's coming on Wednesday or on Thursday.
Yeah, she was.
She's awesome.
Assistant was my best friend that week, so bad.
She's
like,
awesome.
I just wasn't with you, don't worry.
We used to use her on the court group.
Is there anything that you should, once the sale goes through, like if you're in fire, that you are expecting for title to come back to you?
On the buyer side to,
What was the question?
yeah.
Like,
Good.
sale closes, everything's
Yeah.
great, buyer signs, like, are you, as a agent, are you
No.
expecting anything from?
The only thing that we get, and we don't expect it, Heather expects it, and that's the final settlement statement. You should get a copy of it too,
But that's what
actually.
I got, but then I also needed
Yeah.
the FERPA statement, and I asked for that as well,
Okay.
yeah,
So,
because they never sent it to me, or.
was it Rock City? Oh, it was just something else, yeah. Yeah, so those would be ideal. And you wanna get a copy of the settlement statements, because that's a great conversation to have come tax time. It's a great way to talk to your clients, right? To keep a copy of the settlement statement, because they need that for their taxes, right? So you touch base in like February. Hey, you're probably preparing for your taxes. Did you keep a copy of your settlement statement? Do you remember where it is? If not, let me know because I have a copy for you.
Cool.
Right? And you want to do it that way because then that requires them to talk to you. Right? Don't say, oh, I'm gonna send it to you, because then you don't get that conversation. We want as many conversations as we can with our clients after the fact. Staying in touch, making sure we're reaching out to them. Okay?
Yeah, you know, keys too, so like,
Oh,
I
yes.
don't
Yes.
do it till we
Sorry.
guys recorded.
No, yeah, so yeah, keys.
Sounds
So SIM keys done multiple ways. One, the best is if you're the listing agent, leave the lockbox on it, let the buyer agent come and get the keys out of the lockbox and meet their clients there at closing, right? After closing, you do not give the keys to the buyer before closing, no matter what. If you can't do it because you're gonna be out of town, you get someone else to do it for you.
My listing broker
Or-
took the box off the door and then wouldn't answer his phone.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. And then as far as on your side as the listing, have your clients, if they, when they go to move out, have them leave all the rest of the keys and the garage door openers. Those get missed all the time. People forget to have them in their car, on the kitchen counter. And then because you have a key in the lockbox so that you still have access to the property. And that's the easiest way. We used to take everything to the closing table. I've seen big, huge storage bags full of keys and garage door openers, and they're filthy, they're disgusting. And truly, how many people are gonna rekey their house? Every single one, most likely. They should, because you don't know how many people have a copy of the key to that house. Neighbors, kids could have lost the keys, right? So that's another great gift. Have the house
To change the
rekeyed.
locks.
Mm-hmm.
I've never changed the locks.
No. Yeah, that could be a fantastic closing gift, right? What if the door, pay attention to the door handles when you go to the house? They're old and, you know, they're not brand new. Maybe you might buy them a new set.
Right. For that recorded in the county from the escrow office.
Absolutely. Wait until escrow calls you and says, we are recorded. It is not until that moment that you know that you actually are gonna get paid. So don't count your chickens before they're hatched, right?
Escrow actually calls if you.
Yes. Yeah.
If closing is 5 PM on a Friday and then it records at noon, but then it's official at that point, right? So you're not actually waiting until 5. So if I'm at my last listing where I still thought,
That they had till 5?
2, I still thought it was 5 and I still need to go over and grab a couple things out of the house. And I thought, well, I've got time.
Depends on how you write on the agreement. If you say that it is closing, there's possession, right?
Yeah.
So it's possession is at this time. But yes, if it closes, they have until 5 o'clock on that day to close. But if it close, once it's recorded and closed, most parties are gonna be gone anyway, so you can go, don't go before.
How long does it take to?
Depends on the lender. It truly lays all on the lender. And if they don't have the funds, this is why it's never good to close on a Friday. If the lender is waiting last minute and it's going past noon and they still haven't sent over the documents to sign, you're not recording that day. This recording, based on which county it is,
Yeah.
has cutoffs. And they still have to do the wire, and wire cutoffs are like 1 o'clock. Right, so if they haven't wired over, or if they wired to the wire, right there at 1 o'clock, do you think those funds are gonna get wired out to your seller? No, that'll be the next business day, which is Monday. Very important to your buyers and your sellers on when their funds are gonna be there, right? And of course, you guys, you wanna get paid too, so, and most of the time, if it closes and records on Friday, we are not gonna see that check until Monday. And then Heather has to process it. And if it's transmittal day, nothing gets processed on transmittal day.
But the buyer still gets possession on.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
closing
It's just
day
the
at
money that
5.
will follow later.
Mhm.
If it closes and records, recording is the key, it has to record.
What does it take to record?
It's gotta go down to the county office and they have to, stamp it and
Do something official with
do
it.
something official with it.
Yes. So
It's digital, but they stamp it.
it's transmitted to the county office electronically.
And
now,
the
I
county
presume.
comes back and says it's recorded, then escrow calls and says it's recorded.
And
And they
then,
get a copy,
and then the buyer gets possession of the house?
yes.
I'm sure that's just methodology.
I'm just trying to remember back.
Well, they have to record all of the documents, right? So recording fees can be rather high because counties charge so much per page, right? And that's why sometimes you see recording fees are like $200 because they have so many pages they have to record.
Yeah.
Okay, so tomorrow's small group, follow up with, we're gonna do RPR if you're in tomorrow's small group, same thing with Thursday. And then, Thursday, Shelley's gonna be here for the mastermind. And I believe we're starting listings on Thursday, so we'll be working on listing documents, and then Shelley's gonna go over the preliminary title report. And we are, we full day.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank you.
awesome, thanks